All right, joining us now from inside the NBA bubble is former Ohio State All-American Jim Jackson. He is a broadcaster, as you know, Fox Sports colleague. He was on the call for NBA TV
Hmm.
during the Bucks Magic game when the Milwaukee Bucks did not come out for the game. And Jim, I just want to start there. Give us a sense of what's going through your brain. I know the Raptors were kind of talking about maybe
Hmm.
potentially sitting out of games, so this wasn't exactly a huge shock, I would say, but just the general. Give us the rundown of like the Bucks don't come out to warm up. The clock is ticking down closer to zero, and then you realize this is a real thing that's going to happen here.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, for us, we had our production meetings in the morning. Um, got a chance to speak with the coaches, both coaches, Mike Budenholzer and also Steve Clifford. A little bit later in the afternoon, we had a 3:15 hit at the arena for NBA TV. And Mark, you know how it is. So guys are out with their pregame, kind of warming up, stretching. You have the trainer out there. You have some coaches shagging balls, and both teams, Orlando and Milwaukee, were both present on the court. And then we noticed a NBA league official walk to the court and bring the officiating crew over towards the sideline near half court. And they had a conversation, maybe 3 to 4 minutes, maybe. And you can kind of see something was going on, but you just didn't know what. Maybe it was game related. Maybe it was something else we didn't know. So, you fast forward, Orlando is off the court, Milwaukee is off the court. The game clock begins to tick down, and Orlando comes back to the court, in the layup line. And, we're looking in Milwaukee, not out. Time is ticking off, not out, not out. Buzzer sounds, no Milwaukee team. And then we get through our headsets that through the team meeting, they have decided to, boycott and cancel the game. And, they got the Orlando Magic team on board as well.
So, what is your reaction to this? Are you surprised? Because, like I said, I think it's easy to look back now and be like, well, the signs were all there. The players were kind of discussing a little bit, but people talk about a lot of ideas, and to actually make them
Hmm.
happen is a different story. So, like for you as you're witnessing this, was there any part of you that's like, oh my god, I can't believe they're actually doing this, or is it like, like what is going through your brain as you're
Well, unfortunately for us, like where we're at on the bubble, we're isolated from where the players are at. So we don't really have a lot of contact, but a lot of the sideline reporters, independent reporters are on that side. So they get a chance to communicate. Am I surprised? No. I think what happened in Kenosha really, was the straw to break the camel's back, so to speak, especially because it happened in Wisconsin. And that's where Milwaukee, Wisconsin, everything it's all correlated. But I do know it wasn't just planned all of a sudden. I do believe that a few players on the Bucks team had a conversation individually the night before, discussed, the options, what could take place. Then I believe when they had their team meeting before the game, they kind of expressed um, their discomfort as to what had happened, what steps they need to take to ensure that what happened in Kenosha with Jacob Blake was going to be truly investigated the right way. And now, out of that too, keep in mind, the team itself, the players, spoke with their ownership to get in touch with the Attorney General of Wisconsin and also the district attorney in Kenosha so that they could really relay the message of their concerns, but also, implored them to come on TV and announce the findings, the preliminary findings they had from the shooting. And if you watched any CNN yesterday or any of the news outlets, it was a 7 o'clock emergency meeting between those groups.
And just being in that moment, Jim, when you have all these things kind of coming into you in your own television and you're getting ready to call a
Mm-hmm.
basketball game, just the balancing act of saying, like, you basically become a news reporter in that moment. And like you said, Mark said earlier, you're an All-American that went to Ohio State. You played 14 different teams in the NBA. Like, you've been around the block. But in that moment in time, I mean, what came over you? I mean, I know you tweeted in that moment what you were seeing,
Mm-hmm.
but then just handling that moment as a broadcaster. I know that was a heavy moment as well.
Well, it's something you don't prepare for. And I'll give you a prime example. Earlier this year, I was getting ready for our open to the Michigan State at Minnesota game. And that happened to be the afternoon that Kobe Bryant passed. Me playing with Kobe, being a teammate of his, we had to scrap the open and kind of address that tragic situation. That was more emotional that I had to do, but as a professional, you try to do your job the best way you can through an emotional state. This was very similar from the standpoint of you don't have any preparation notes for this, but you kind of know the landscape of what's going on around NBA basketball and the social issues. So you try to address those things as best as you can, use the knowledge and information that you acquired over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 months, and try to relay that to the audience the best way you can.
You mentioned you're not necessarily interacting with the players, how the bubble's structured, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what is just the general vibe in light of, I know you're not like, going to these players meetings and all that.
Right.
If you were to just drop like the average fan who's on the outside, because even just the idea of a bubble is kind of,
Yeah.
we're kind of struggling trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah.
But in your experience, just speaking from what you're seeing, what you're feeling, whatever, like if you were to drop the average fan in this bubble and they're just like walking around the campus, leading up to this player strike, and now we have word that the playoffs are going to continue. Does it feel like a somber thing? Is there like an excitement that like maybe some changes on the horizon, somewhere in the middle? Like what is just the overall tenor of the campus there?
Well, ours is different because we're here in the media part. So you have red badge, green badge, yellow badge. You have different areas. Turner, along with ESPN and NBA, I wouldn't say media, but more so some NBA officials are at our hotel. Owners stay at our hotel and things like that. So it's a different tenor here because you have a lot of people who work the games in production, a lot of people who cover it. So it's not so much the emotional state in regards to the actual teams or organizations, more so than people actually put on production for the game. And they're basically status quo. Their job is to go prepared. They may do two games a day. So that's what they're focused on. But it is also, I think, once the bubble, and I got here the 15th, so I wasn't here from day one. So I didn't get a chance to see when everybody first touched down and what the tenor was then. Because then you have a kind of an apprehension of, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to expect. We got, daily temperature tests. You have COVID tests twice a week. But now people have been in the bubble for quite some time, and now they're accustomed to their surroundings. But if I was to drop you in, just imagine 3 or 4 hotels, a golf course, and that's the perimeter in which you kind of stay around in. So, we're implored not to kind of leave the campus area unless we're actually going to the game. So there are activities that we do here, go down to the pool, we'll, meet up for dinner, go play golf. But for the most part, it's just basketball. For me, it's basketball and golf.
And how many, like, there was this window in time of like everyone was asking the question, what's next? What will the guys do when they have this players only meeting? What will be the outcome of that? Will we have basketball? That apprehension that was felt, in the media sphere, right? Was that felt in that area where you are? But because these guys are more, like you said, accommodating the actual events themselves. So, I mean, is there apprehension that was going around? Okay.
Oh yeah, because everybody was, wondering where they go work, whether the games were canceled. That's paychecks gone, honestly, if the games don't go on. So a lot of people were in limbo in regards to, okay, we know the games got canceled on Wednesday. More than likely, you're going to have a cancellation on Thursday. But what does that mean going forward? Do I have to stay here? Do I leave? What happens? All of those questions were going on amongst everybody here because you just didn't know. So the only thing you can really do is wait and see what came about today once the players had their second meeting, early this morning, along with the Board of Governors meeting, and what that outcome would be would pretty much detail, media, production, what our plans would be.
Jim, I know you've been asked a lot to speak on behalf of the players, which is kind of unfair given that you're not exactly – your playing career was so far in the past, and it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison. So I don't necessarily want to do that, but just can you speak to your experience as a player now with all this going on? The NBA, the players have now decided to continue with the playoffs. I'm on the outside looking in wondering – how can these guys, I mean, I know they're professionals, but my God, to like now have to like suit it up and pretend that like this is the most important, winning game 6 is the most important thing in my life. how do these guys, what's going through your mind if you're a player right now? Not so much the like you have a job to do, and I speak to that, just like me doing this job feels weird in this time, and I'm not
Mhm.
an NBA player, and there's no stakes, and I don't have all this going on. So the idea of these guys like having to play basketball, what could possibly, like, how do you get yourself ready to play? How do you, why do you feel as a fan like this is, I don't know if tainted is the right word, asterisk is the
Mhm.
right word, but like even as a fan it kind of feels weird for me to care, like, is LeBron going to add another championship to his leg? Like, it sort of just feels weird, that whole vibe right now. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have played or not played, but now as we're progressing forward, if you're a player, like, how do you suss through all that?
Well, I mean, use you for an example. You said you don't feel comfortable at times because of everything that's going on, but yet and still you have a job to do. You have to be professional in what you do. Okay, it's the same thing. Life is not meant to be always comfortable. You're going to do some things that make you uncomfortable. Okay, you'll do things at times when it may be a little stressful. Okay, but at the end of the day, we're basketball players, media people. Okay, we have a very good life. So as long as we keep that in perspective, and understand what our goals are. When you put out there that you want to, be active in social causes, okay, and you want to affect change. Well, change, it comes with a level of uncomfortability, okay, that you have to deal with. Okay, you bring that on yourself when you step out there on the limb and say, this is what our agendas are, this is what our platform is, this is what we want to promote. So you have to be, if you're going to do that, you got to accept the responsibility of A, doing your job when you're supposed to, B, staying online in focus with the goals and agenda you set for your social activism. Okay, and that's what these young men are doing. And to my playing days, keep in mind, Mark, I retired 14 years ago, and the relationship with the NBA and the Players Association was a lot different. Okay, it was always this constant battle. But because times have changed, these young men are now more business entities all into themselves. They have a better working relationship with Adam Silver and in the front office. Okay, so now they're kind of working more hand in hand, especially when it comes to social activism. So when times like this come about, i.e., stop of the season, what we need to do in the bubble, how can we continue to push the narrative of racial equality? We're gonna really push hard to help educate from a voter suppression perspective, criminal justice reform, all these things now jointly, the NBA and the Players Association have come together. So when you have something that happened like this, you got to keep in mind the owners have been supporting the players. The NBA have been supporting the players. It would be quite odd and quite contrary to everything that has happened if some of the demands that the players set to these owners weren't going to be met, just based on everything that has got us to this point.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem like the first time, I mean, just being a former player, there's no middleman in the situation. The players are speaking directly to those owners at some level, and with the league on their side and trying to accommodate them I mean, it was the first time we've just seen the power. I mean, even with the Brewers and the MLB. And
right.
One of the things that I've seen is like the athletes, people are like, well, of course, like the soccer players and the baseball players are friends with the basketball players and the football players, and all these guys have that bond. Was this something that, as a former athlete, were you reaching out to or hearing from? I know there were people that were across the world, that from Australia, that were reaching out and pointing out things. So was that happening for you as well?
Well, yeah, just through conversations, through Twitter, through text, just different people are really applauding the efforts of these young men who kind of took a stance. And if you back up just a little bit, it's funny in society too. And Mark, being a former athlete, this is funny, especially being an African American athlete. When you stand up for social causes, the first argument you have is, well, you made all this money. America is great for you. You didn't experience. Well, that's not the point. I, as a Black man, I'll be 50 years old this year. It's a lot of experiences that I've been through as a young man where I've encountered a lot of racial hatred, okay, where I've been profiled by the police. Oh, yet and still, I've been on the platform and made millions of dollars, and now I'm on TV. That shouldn't bother me. You shouldn't complain about it. But like I've always said, the beauty about having a community is that when somebody makes it out, now it's your responsibility to pass it forward. okay, to the next person, to the next family. That doesn't always mean just money. That means through societal changes that you want to impact, okay, having your time and presence in the community. More importantly, sometimes being a voice for the people who are marginalized. And that's what frustrates me so much when people always want to put dollar signs behind something and say, well, you made all this money, so you shouldn't complain. Well, that's not necessarily always the truth.
Just, do you feel like a sense of pride as a guy who represents the NBA, and you will for the rest of your life? You're a former NBA player, no matter what you do the rest of your life. Just looking back on the arc, I mean, you entered the league a few months after the Rodney King riots, and that's something that, like, you enter the NBA and you go through, like, kind of there was the transition period with the Malice in the Palace, and Stern does the dress code, and there's just kind of this tug of war with the players. It's got to be almost surreal for you to just kind of see the last 30 years or so, the arc of where the league has gone and how we ended up here.
Well, it is from this perspective, because I was part of the players union. I was a vice president early on. So the things that we fought for, revenue sharing, understanding the economics of the basketball related income, having more shares for the a split of the licensing money, understanding the TV contracts, contractually what we do in the NBA as far as term length of deals, all these things, but also setting up a better relationship between the Players Association and also the NBA. That took time. We didn't get the chance to reap the benefits of it while we were playing, but these young men that are now here benefits from it. Adam Silver was a deputy commissioner under David Stern, so he was a part of these early negotiations. He knew he understood what the players were aiming to achieve with the relationship with the owners. So as that grew, now you put yourself in a situation, Adam Silver takes over, you have a fresh new crop of young men led by an outstanding leader in Chris Paul. Now you have a relationship with the communications are there. Will they always agree? No. When collective bargaining comes up, will they always agree? No. But the communication lines now have opened up a lot more. At least you listen. Okay, you take into account that if we do things together, we can accomplish so much more. And I think you see that with where we're at today. That's why they were able to resolve this issue within 24 hours. Whereas maybe in the past, if something like this came up, I don't think the transition to be able to move forward would be there this easily.
We always get the arguments of like the previous generation of the NBA, like you said, the guys who were on the forefront of making all these changes, and now these guys are reaping the benefits. And there may be sometimes some confrontation over basketball philosophies and things like that. But it has been great. Like Kenny Smith, in solidarity, walks out last night, to join in with the players. So how great has it been to see that sort of bridging of the generational gap too in the basketball row, on both sides getting together and saying we support each other, I guess.
Well, I'm not one that lives in the past and says, well, when I played, my era was the best, and right now the game is really going sideways. I'm not like that, because each era is inclusive all into itself, and they have different attributes that make it really well. What happened in the 70s was different in the 80s, the 90s, 2000, and where we're at. Okay, the evolution of the game has to change in order for it to survive. That's why it's more international right now. That's why, our players are easily recognized across the world because of that. And also the transition with older players to younger players. When I was in the league, someone looked out for me. Someone showed me the way to be a professional. And that's what we should do. You don't look and count somebody else's money, because what we fought for was that the next generation, just like anything else, and it doesn't have to be sports.
For the best access, perspective, and personalities in all of sports, follow us at Fox Sports on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.